We'll call to order the Public Works Committee meeting for Tuesday, March 15th, 2016. Could we get a roll call and a determination of a quorum? And I know Mr. Wright is here. Here he comes. Okay, perfect.
Doyle. Estes. Roberts. Weifenbach.
Here.
Wright. We have a quorum.
Thank you. First thing we'll do is ask for an adoption of the agenda, and I believe we have an item to be added to the agenda. And we'll just call that item number 11, or would that will work for us?
Yes,
Okay.
that'll work.
Item number 11 from Mr. Roberts in reference to the Menalusahan, is that correct?
Yes, I'd like to add discussion and direction for new roof for Menalusahan Senior Center.
Okay, we'll make that number 11. Do we have any other additions to the agenda?
I'll second.
Okay. A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion passes. We'll go to general public comment, a time for members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the committee on any issue not limited to the items on the agenda. Action will not be taken at the meeting on any item not on the agenda, except by placement on the agenda by a unanimous vote of the alderman present. I have no speaker request forms. Is there someone in the audience that would like to speak on an item? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to items number 1 through 9. And we'll open up public comment on items 1 through 9. No speaker request forms. Anybody like to speak on? Okay, have a motion and a second to close public comment. All in favor, say aye. Motion carries. Now we move on to items 1. Do we go through each one of these again?
No,
He made the motion to approve 1 through 9. I'm sorry. So we'll go to item number 10, engineering services. Well, we'll just do it again. Items number 1 through 9. Do you have any comments on item?
moved.
Have a motion and a second to approve items 1 through 9. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. We'll move on to item number 10, which we'll open up public comment on item number 10. No public comment on item number 10. We'll move close comment on that, and we'll read in item number 10. It's engineering services, adopt water reclamation facility plan dated February 16th, 2016. Does engineering wanted to talk about that item? Dale, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have Dan Kuhn from Engineering Services Division is going to give you a short presentation today regarding the water reclamation facilities plan that we're requesting adoption of today. So if you'll bear with us just for a few minutes, Dan will get kicked off here and tell you everything.
We're ready to go anytime you are.
Okay. And the presentation did come up. There we go. Sorry about that. As Dale said, I think I met most of you on the committee. My name is Dan Kuhn. I'm an operations management engineer with the City of Rapid City Engineering Services Division. And today I'd like to give you a brief overview of a facility plan that we have been working on for a little over a year now for the city's water reclamation facility. We have some key members of the project team that have been working on this plan that I'd like to introduce. With HDR Engineering, who we hired to help us develop this plan, have Dan Graber, Delron Peters, and Chris Robinson. And the most important member of our project team, and certainly today the best dressed, Dave Van Cleve, the Rapid City Water Reclamation Superintendent, was a key member and actually our customer in development of this plan. So this just a brief overview of the topics of discussion as part of the plan. Purpose for the plan, or why develop a facility plan for our water reclamation facility or our wastewater at all? Well, we have known that there is a trend nationally that there are stricter discharge limits coming down and being implemented nationwide, and those discharge limits are going to impact South Dakota and in turn Rapid City here in the future. The new permit limits anticipated include new ammonia discharge limits and new nutrient discharge limits, which include nitrogen and phosphorus, and I'll discuss those in more detail later. Also, at the facility, we are continuously making decisions for capital improvements, operational changes that we might want to make at the facility, and we wanted to have a long-term plan in place so that any short-term decisions we make are in line with any long-term plan that there may be. And short, we want to get the best value or bang for our buck and not do something that is inconsistent with a long-term plan. And then also, the last facility plan was adopted in 2000. So that plan has served us well, although it's reaching about 20 years old. Although the plan was adopted in 2000, the work done to develop the plan was done in 1998 and 1999. So it was just time for a number of reasons to do a new facility plan. Oh, I'll get this figured out. The key driver in all of this are regulatory changes that are coming down both nationally and will eventually filter down to the state level in South Dakota. Right now, we have an existing permit that was issued in the year 2000 and has been administratively renewed several times between then and now. The current permit that you see is really not the permit we're operating under today. It's a permit that we anticipate being issued in 2016. Now that permit, when it will be issued, will contain more strict ammonia standards for discharge at the facility. Right now, we don't anticipate any changes as a result of this 2016 permit. We feel the facility as it exists today, if it's well maintained as it always is and operated correctly, will be able to meet those discharge limits. Now, we will need to maintain the facility and keep operating it well, but we're comfortable that we can meet those 2016 discharge limits. The next big permit that we see coming down the road is labeled permit number 1 there. And we've put some years in here. You'll see that we anticipate this permit number 1 being issued in the year 2020. That may occur then. Usually permits are issued on about a 5-year cycle. May happen sooner, it may happen later, but at least it gives you some reference of a time frame when that permit may be coming. That permit is going to be South Dakota Department of Environment and Natural Resources essentially heads up to the city of Rapid City. We anticipate them to identify more strict ammonia discharge standards, and with this permit, tell the city that some point in the future, probably 5 years, we are going to implement more strict ammonia discharge standards. So Rapid City, we're giving you 5 years to start your process of design, funding, construction, to get ready for these discharge standards that will come in the next permit, which we anticipate is permit number 2 in 2025. That permit we anticipate will have the more strict ammonia discharge standards, and when that permit is issued, we will have to have the treatment capability in place to meet those discharge standards. We also anticipate with that permit number 2, they'll identify some more strict nutrient removal standards that will be coming forward. Just like they said, get ready for ammonia, they're going to probably say, get ready for these nutrient discharge standards. So that permit number 3, which we anticipate in 2030, will probably contain those nutrient discharge standards, and we'll have to have a treatment capability in place by that time to meet those discharge standards. And then beyond that, There is the potential for more stringent nutrient requirements, but to try and predict what the regulatory environment is 20 years from now is very, very difficult. Now, why do we think these standards are coming down? This map here shows, obviously, the United States, and the states that are shaded in either a blue or a green that really is very light and isn't showing up, but well over half of the states have or will have nutrient-related regulations in place by 2019. And if you recall the previous slide, we anticipate nutrient discharge limits in South Dakota somewhere around 2030. So there are already states that have implemented these standards. This is being driven by the national level, the EPA, through laws that are passed. Essentially, parts of the Clean Water Act are saying we need to go to these more stringent ammonia and nutrient standards. They then pass that requirement or that responsibility onto the states to develop those standards and those regulations. More locally around us, the states that are have black hash marks on them, mainly North Dakota, Wyoming, Kansas, Iowa, they do not currently have nutrient discharge standards, but they have formed a committee or a task force or are on their way in developing the process of developing those nutrient discharge standards. Now, South Dakota, not to say they haven't done anything, they're aware of these standards are out there. They've discussed it internally, their staff is aware of it. They just haven't formally formed a committee or a task force to move forward with development of these standards. So what does that mean? If we have more strict regulations affecting or impacting our discharge standards, and when I talk discharge, I mean the effluent or the wastewater after it's treated that goes into Rapid Creek. That's the discharge standard that we're meeting here. So what that impacts most directly is what we've termed treatment capacity. And treatment capacity is a combination of hydraulic capacity, essentially what is the volume of water that comes to the plant that you have to treat, and then also the process used to treat the water. How are we treating the water, removing the pollutants to meet these discharge standards? The next thing is pretty intuitive. As our service population increases, so does our wastewater flow received at the facility. But as our wastewater flow increases, the time to treat that wastewater in the facility decreases. So therefore, we need to meet these higher or more strict discharge standards. We need a higher treatment capacity process or the ability to meet the increased treatment capacity requirements. And a way to look at that is what population can we serve with the treatment capacity we have in place at any given time. This chart right here is a representation of the population served at the facility. And this shows what we could do, what population we could serve with the existing facility, no modifications, and our existing permit that is in hand today, not the permit in 2016, but where both the facility and the permit stand today. Today we're serving approximately 80,000 people, and doing just fine, having no real problems meeting our discharge requirements. The 2000 facility plan I mentioned earlier predicted or modeled that the existing facility at today's existing discharge requirements, we could service 94,000 people. We took a look at that as part of this new plan, and we're comfortable that that's a pretty accurate number. Now, the permit we expect to receive this year with the slightly more strict ammonia discharge standards with the existing facility, modeling shows us that we can serve about 91,000 people. So again, we're pretty comfortable. We have, about 10,000 people extra capacity at the plant. However, when you get to the permit number 2 with new ammonia limits, and again, that's the permit we would anticipate being in effect in around 2025, with the existing facility, we could service about 82,000 people. So essentially, if you look at, we're servicing 80,000 today, and we need to service, we can only service 82,000 in the year 2025. We can't meet our treatment capacity requirements because we're going to be serving more than 82,000 people in 2025. And then if you look at permit number 3 with the nutrient limits, the number is 0. The existing facility cannot treat the wastewater to meet nutrient discharge limit requirements. So what does that really drive? One of the key things that you develop when you develop a facility plan is your capital improvement plan. And the need for new treatment capacity, a lot of things drive that capital improvement plan. And as I talked about, the regulatory requirements in this case are the key driver in development of our capital improvement plan for the facility. With the regulatory requirements, as I discussed, we need increased treatment capacity and new treatment capability, new types of treatment. Flow and loads are just really the amount of water that you get at the facility, and then the load is what is the pollutant that is in that wastewater you have to treat. And then age and condition of the facility. We have some very old components or parts of the facility out there that have to continue to run from now until we shift our treatment capacity or do something with the new regulatory requirements. And those involve not just the process equipment that treats the water, but there's buildings out there that structurally we have to keep sound, architecturally sound, electrical. There is a very tough environment out there for electrical equipment, so we're continually monitoring that. And then health and safety as it's involved at the facility. This just gives you, from an age and condition standpoint, what we have out there right now. The red part of the facility was constructed as the original plant that was constructed in 1967, as in still in use today. The yellow part of that you see up there was an expansion that was regulatory driven, that was built and constructed in 1985. 1991, the small green area was just an improvement in our solids handling at the head of the plant. And then the blue that you see was again a regulatory and capacity driven expansion that was completed in 2003. And there's also somewhat a coincidence or a trend. If you look at between 1967 and 1985 is 18 years, and between 1985 and 2003 is 18 years, and we're predicting between 2003 and approximately 2025 is about 22 years. So it appears that about every 20 years there's a regulatory change that comes along that requires some type of new treatment capacity at the facility. This is a very busy table of summarizing all of the capital improvements that were identified out at the facility. And I want to mention that when the direction given to HDR when we developed the capital improvement plan was we want to know about everything. If you see something that you think needs improved or repaired, or we need to do something with it, identify it and get it into the plan. Now that doesn't mean we'll address every little thing in the plan, but at least it's identified so that if we need to move forward with it, we have a good starting point. The number that is probably on everybody's minds, what did we identify for capital needs at the facility? And this is over the next 20 years, we see the potential for $62 million worth of improvements out at the facility. Again, as I said, will all of those happen? I don't know. Many of them will. Two that we see happening as a result of the regulatory requirements. Right here is, if you'll see, permit number 2, estimated in today's dollars, that's about a $21 million improvement needed at the facility. To continue to meet regulatory requirements for permit number 3, sorry about that, we're at about $8 million. So close to half of this $62 million that we've identified in capital improvements is related to regulatory requirements and increasing capacity at the plant. This figure just shows some, not all, of the age and condition related improvements that we feel are needed at the plant. And these improvements, right now, today, we are not asking or requesting any type of funding. We're just presenting the plan and requesting that it be adopted. We will work on these projects that we think need to come forward in the near future, and we'll bring them and put them through the system just like any kind of capital improvement. There'll be, the design will be approved, the advertising authority, it will be conducted, business will be conducted just like it is with any other capital improvement at the facility. This is the improvements that we've identified that will be needed for when permit 2 comes around and is implemented in around 2025. And the main thing that we're doing here is we're moving the capacity to the newer part of the plant. For those of you that aren't familiar with the plant, here is the older part of the facility, and down in this area is the newer part of the facility. We will be shifting flow from the older part of the facility down here to this newer part of the facility. And also, as a result, when permit number 2 is implemented, these items, either constructed in 1967 or 1985, will no longer be part of the treatment process out at the water reclamation facility. And this move is actually consistent with the 2000 facility plan that showed increased aeration basins and increased capacity in the lower part of this plant. So just moving forward in the permit number 3 that we anticipate again in 2030 is we've shifted the flow down to the south plant, as the operations person I'll call it, and then we just add a treatment capability, not so much capacity, but capability to handle the nutrients that are in the wastewater stream. With that said, again, that was a very, very brief overview of the facility plan. What we're requesting here again today is, again, not any specific funding. We will bring forward projects and propose funding sources when the time is right for these plans. But what we would like today is have the council adopt this plan with this basic overview that eventually in 10 years from now or so, we will be moving the treatment capacity down to the newer part of the plant, mainly because there are things, we still have to keep the old plant running. And so there are decisions that are going to have to be made. How far do we go into that old plant and keep it running? And so with adoption of this plan, we have more confidence that, okay, this is the direction we're going. Makes it maybe not easier, but makes it more comfortable to make some of the decisions as far as capital improvements and operations that we're going to need to make over the next 5 to 10 years. So with that, I'd be welcome any questions from the committee or anyone else here. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. The chair will recognize Alderman Wright.
I make a motion that this item be sent to council for presentation and discussion Monday night.
A motion and a second, and I think the chair will recognize Alderman Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dan, I got a couple questions for you.
Sure.
So, would it be fair to say that the water we discharged today is the highest quality water that we've ever discharged? We've continually made improvements, and the water we're discharging today in this past year or since our last renovation, it's the highest quality water ever discharged?
I think that's a fair statement. It's probably the most stringent discharge requirements, and we're meeting those requirements, so yes, it's the highest quality.
So now somebody sitting in an office has decided that this water is harmful?
No, the thing that's driving this are the nutrients, ammonias and nutrients, and Dave, do you want to handle that?
Dave Van Cleve. As Dan said, the thing that's driving much of this is what we call nutrients. And we're talking about nitrogen and phosphorus. And what they've observed is that nitrogen and phosphorus as nutrients cause algal blooms. They cause water to generate a lot of plant growth and those kind of things. And throughout the country, as our population grows, we discharge more and more and more nutrients over time. And this is really creating some problems quite a long ways from here. It's related to a dead zone that actually occurs in the Gulf of Mexico. And essentially, for miles around the Gulf of Mexico, we have what is called an anoxic zone, where there is no oxygen. And so essentially it's killing off the animal life that lives in the ocean. And it all relates back to these nutrients that we discharge. Currently, the state of treatment we deal with is ammonia, and that is a toxic product. And so that's why you're seeing those limits become more and more stringent over time, because they have immediate impacts on the wildlife that exists in Rapid Creek, for example. So down the road, they're starting to look at other types of constituents, and science changes. You know, they discover new things, and they find out that we have more of an impact on our world than we ever thought we did. And so that's where some of this is coming from.
I appreciate that. My next question would be, it's probably hard to answer right now. As an enterprise fund, and looking at budgeting, I mean, you're talking $60 million over 20 years. So if you figure $3 million a year, how much tolerance for paying for that does your enterprise fund currently have, or do you even have an estimate on that?
Well, we don't have a lot of tolerance for it right now. So it's going to have to be something that we're going to have to look at in terms of, you know, what the community can afford to pay, what we can, you know, what types of financing options are available.
I guess if just a little touch on that could be added for the council presentation would be helpful.
Okay.
My question about the guy sitting in the it was not meant to be disrespectful to you guys. I know, but it's just kind of, you sit here and you're baffling, going, you know, that water ends up in Oahe, and there's a lot of people eating walleye, and I'm just trying to figure out, you know, so what's going on here. So
We're not alone in this boat.
yeah, I see that.
It's going to affect, well, the entire state of South Dakota. It affects us nationally. As a matter of fact, there was an EPA study that just came out in January, and they identified the needs for wastewater in the country at approximately $271 billion that needs to be spent within the next approximately 5 to 20 years.
Okay.
And so it's pretty significant.
Thank you. I appreciate your answers. Thanks.
Thank you. Chair will recognize Alderman Wright.
I just want to add a little historical perspective. I think it was called eutrophication in the 70s when we had, remember the phosphate-free detergent that came out because of the, like Tide and so forth, were causing algae blooms in lagoons and so forth. So this is a continuing battle. I think your comment about our ever-growing population is appropriate, and getting rid of phosphate detergents work then, but it's not enough today. And I know there's also been discussion in the ag community, ag production, of soil erosion and water runoff, stormwater runoff, of how that phosphates come off those. So this is a very complicated issue, and it isn't just wastewater, it's how it affects the waters of the U.S. and the world. So thank you.
Chair will recognize Alderman Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dave, I have a question for you. Have we looked at when's the last time we did a rate study for solid waste? Do you know?
A little over 7 years ago.
Because I think everybody in Rapid City probably knows how little I like raising taxes or rates. But I'd rather see a small rate increase built in now to pay for this over the next 20 or 30 years than to wait 10 years and all of a sudden have to slap the taxpayers and the ratepayers in the face. And I've seen that happen too many times. So I think that's going to be a discussion we're going to have, as much as I do not want to have that discussion. $62 million in 20 to 30 years, it's a lot easier to start coming up with it now than then. So thank you.
Thank you. The chair is going to take a little bit of liberty here because I got to say I was proud to be on the council when we went through this with the water, Jackson Springs, and one of the things that Alderman Estes and Alderman Roberts had alluded to was the fact that we had to hammer the citizens of Rapid City with increased water bills that I think that almost doubled over a period of 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. So I appreciate them bringing up the fact that it would be nice to have, the funding. How we're gonna do this. I think that taking care of it now, a little bit at a time, moving forward, and gradually increasing into it. Obviously, the EPA is going to regulate it. I was in Lake Havasu last weekend, and they have algae growth there, and they can't figure out where it came from. So I mean, it's interesting that they hadn't had it for years. Now all of a sudden they've got it in the lake, and assuming that it's probably related somewhat, and understanding. But I appreciate Alderman Estes bringing it up. If there's a way that you can, I don't know how we got to do that, and incorporate that and bring that to the council at some time to say, this is what our council is really meant to do, is handle these types of situations on the front side, not wait till the back when it's too late, because none of us like raising taxes, but in this is a reality. It's an enterprise fund. It's a cost of doing business that we're going to have to look at, and if we manage it responsibly and get ahead of the game, we're not going to come 5 years before and go, boom, we're going to double your rates because we haven't done anything. It's been politically incorrect to do that in the past, but it's actually irresponsible too. So appreciate your presentation today. We have a motion on the floor for approval. So all in favor? Oh, yeah, it's a motion to send it to the council. To send it to the council for presentation. Is that correct? Okay. So that's the motion on the floor. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And we'll go to item number 11 from Alderman Roberts. It's a discussion on the roof at the Minnelusa Center.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. I think as everyone on this dais knows, I'm the liaison to Minnelusa Senior Center, and I am also a board member at Minnelusa. A few months back, the roof on the building started leaking very badly. I've had a chance to look into a few things in the city, talk to a few people, but still a little unclear on who is actually responsible for some of these issues on the building. I think we need to clear that up. It's been a long time since there has been a new agreement between the Minnelusa and the city. I think that we are at the point where we should probably sit down and come up with a new agreement with them. But what I'm looking for is a recommendation from staff, or if even another council member knows how to bring this forward. The cost of this roof, unfortunately, Minnelusa can't afford it. The cost for the new roof is almost the same amount as their whole yearly budget. Unfortunately, in the research that I have done on this, they have not had a new roof in over 20 years, and anybody that knows how rubber bladder roofs work, that is really stretching the life of that roof. And they just, I guess I can say we because I'm on the board, need a new roof before it causes even more damage. And it is a city building, and that's one of the other things that I want to discuss and get clarified. Unfortunately, when we had the big hailstorm come through a few years ago and every other city building was looked at, the adjusters looked at it, nobody looked at Minnelusahan because nobody really knows who takes care of that building. So that's another thing I want to clarify. So if anybody has any questions for me, or we could just bring it up Monday night and discuss it more on the council and kind of get a direction on where to go. I guess what I'm looking for is a couple of different things. One, do we have to put it out to RFP? If we do, that's great, but who's going to set it up? Two, can we bring it forward as an emergency? We have a tremendous amount of undesignated cash right now, thank God, because sales tax was high last year. And can we just bring it through as an emergency and get it done? So, and I have had estimates on it if anybody would like to see the estimates. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Roberts. I'm not sure if we need a motion to move it to council to have a discussion in reference to fixing this roof.
You need it, so moved.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion will carry. Thank you. We have a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.